Wow, I learned a lot. And I think these talks have helped us understand how important the private sector is in terms of meeting the dietary needs of older Americans. Our next speaker is a colleague, John Ruff. His talk is Food Product Development for Older Adults. John is retired from Kraft Foods, where he headed research and development for international and North American businesses, and a past president of the Institute of Food Technology. Welcome to the podium, John.
Thank you, Susie. One of the questions I was asked to address was, what's the food industry doing about older adults? And there's a tendency to assume the simple answer is not a lot, and I could sit down. But I was thinking about this a few weeks ago, and one of the earliest projects I worked on was on a product called Deserta. Anybody remember Deserta? I don't know whether it was originally developed for diabetics. It was developed in the 20s, believe it or not. But there's no question that its business was predominantly diabetics, because it tasted awful. It was saccharin and cyclamate, or saccharin when cyclamate was banned, before aspartame. And that's where the market was. So, if you think about it, that was effectively a product for the older adults. At the same time, in the 70s, General Foods, the organization I was part of, was doing a lot of work that people don't realize on sodium reduction. Why was it doing it? Because back then, we thought sodium was an issue for basically the over 50s. That was kind of the area. So there has certainly been a lot of work. But it's true to say, if you walk around a supermarket, which I did a couple of weeks ago, you do not find very many products that are overtly marketed for older adults. In fact, I think the only real one that I could think of, and I was validated when I walked around my supermarket, was the sort of Boost Ensure supplement area. Those products, were developed like 40 years ago and have been very successful for a long time. They're sort of declining now, I believe, in terms of sales. What's ironic is that one of them was developed by a pharmaceutical company, and the other one was developed by an infant nutrition company. One of them is now owned by a food company who I know a number of folks are here today. So, yeah, in terms of specifics, it's not there. On the other hand, if you walk 2 aisles over in the same supermarket, you come across the supplement business, which is incredibly successful and is very successful in marketing to older adults. In fact, the brand at the front here, if you can see it, is Centrum Silver, which is very much targeted to that area. So there's an interesting point there that I'll come back to in some of my thoughts and remarks. Having said that, maybe there's some sort of flags on the horizon. I'm sure a number of you have seen this. This is just a newspaper clipping, although I do include the reference to it. But this is, I think, to a lot of people, not news. The issue that maybe, sort of calcium, taking more calcium when you're over 50 may not have the benefits that people have historically believed, even though it's an enormous area, whether it's done through supplements as it is widely or through products. But it illustrates another issue that, maybe one of the best ways to develop products or to help the elderly population is to make sure that the nutrition we're getting before we're 50 is adequate, as opposed to worrying about it afterwards. So I'm not trying to sort of say it's all there. And I'll come back to that too. But let me kind of move to the theme. Some of my earlier slides, I think, have been well covered by prior speakers, but 50 plus, the group, I couldn't think of a less homogenous group than 50 plus. It is very wide. People are living longer. Those at the top of the age bracket, they certainly don't want to be told they're old or that they need a walker. The old adage, or the adage we say now, that 50 is the new 30, 70 is the new 50. So the key to making products for older adults is not to make products for them, or not to overtly tell them you're making products for them, and often not necessarily uniquely for them. Certainly if we stereotype people, as we heard yesterday, whether they're poor, whether they're old, whatever it is, we're gonna alienate them, and we're not gonna be successful. Having said that, there are a lot of things that are starting in our favor. A lot of the sort of adoption of healthier food behavior actually increases. So, whole grain, for instance, goes from 35% to 44% from the younger part of the age group to the older, and that's higher than even younger. So omega-3 is another example. And by the way, there's a whole set of references at the end on all of this data that I quote, as well as some of the articles. The flip side here is that there's a tendency, and maybe it's age gets us to be more skeptical. There's a tendency to get more skeptical about functional health claims and so forth. So there are certainly some challenges there. Well, who are the 50 plus? Well, one large chunk of the baby boomers. And as you heard yesterday, this is the wealthiest group and the fastest growing group of the population still. It also spends it drives that bottom statistic, the global market for functional and foods, which is continuing to grow. Interesting point though, in 20 years' time, that group is going to be 70 to 90. Now, I don't think that group's suddenly going to be poor. It may not be the wealthiest anymore because our demographics will have changed. But that shift is, I believe, going to actually make a big difference and actually facilitate and benefit and provide a lot more opportunities for perhaps more overt development and marketing of products for the older population, whether they're 50 plus, 70 plus, or whatever. They're health conscious. They're interested in protein, fibers, antioxidants. We all want to live forever, so we're seeking foods to delay the aging process, and you hear that a lot. As I've already said, they use supplements. The younger boomers are more likely to consume the quinoas, the ancient grains. Interestingly, pasta consumption drops over 55. Fruit and vegetables increase. So there's, again, a lot of things that are in our favor here in terms of the tendencies of this population. Like everybody, they're starting to catch on to the sort of trends to avoid artificial ingredients, additives, and preservatives, and I'll come back to that also. They're drawn to strong flavors. They're learning new cooking techniques. They're a lot fitter than certainly I think of my parents and our prior generation. Mainly up to the age of about 65, they're trying to lose weight, and after that, it's usually more about maintaining weight and maintaining healthy weight, maintaining lean body mass. Socially active, involved in the community, travel more. One of that statistic yesterday about what makes you healthier in the environment. Some good things here about this group. They pay attention to packaging design. They certainly own the smartphones, but I will admit I don't use mine anywhere near as much as my kids, and I suspect that's true of a lot of us. There's also concern about sort of privacy. Advertising on social media kind of is often viewed as a sort of invasion of privacy. Health is a real concern. I mean, the 50 plus believe that food and beverages are important and can help them stay young, as I've said before. And I won't go through, but I've listed the health conditions that continue, that increase and become more severe as people age. Interestingly, this generation is more concerned about nutritional value than the source of the ingredients. I talked before about wanting natural and so forth. But there's still a bigger concern for the nutritional value. Health claims, certainly matter. Low in sodium, fat, good for you. Omega-3. There's a tendency to accept fortification more in beverages than food, and like a lot of us, they're more and more shopping on the perimeter of the store. And again, like a lot of us, like a lot of people in particular, really look for value for money. So the cost and the economics are really important. But as this group's age, the needs change. And they change in mental acuity and mobility, sight. We've heard a lot about this, taste, and the progression of either an existing disease or new chronic diseases. One of the areas that's been touched on before is sensory losses, all 5 senses which affect how we eat in a major way. And this is a really major challenge in terms of leading to decreased palatability. And in fact, I think it may have already been said, I mean, this group is, in the Western world, is the largest group that's at the risk of malnutrition, and this is probably one of the primary factors, is the fact that the people just do not enjoy their food as much, or the palatability and so forth. But the senses are not all affected in the same way. Smell and taste, for instance, the decline in the ability to smell is more common than the taste. And the loss of smell actually can lead to weight loss for the reasons I've already articulated. It can actually lead to weight gain because people don't actually know when to sort of stop eating. The satiation signs aren't as strong. And it certainly can be a food safety risk. There's also a decline usually in salty, sour, bitter, interestingly not usually in sweet, which is probably a bad thing if we think about it. Nature didn't do us a favor there, but so be it. The other major area is the difficulty in chewing, swallowing, and that can certainly limit the type of foods that people can eat, and again, can affect nutrition as well as quality of life. So complicated way, long way of saying, I'm not going to go through this chart, but product development is pretty complex in the first case, but it's even more complex when you're dealing with the elderly. And I'll go through some of the things that are on that complicated slide in terms of the challenges. The younger boomers are certainly more open to preventative messages versus the older part of the population. I mean, and that's certainly a challenge. Having said that, both want to live in good health, as I've already said. We've got significant issues, as have been touched on, with institutional patients and home-based elderly at risk of nutrition. But the marketing, as I've alluded, is tricky. How do you communicate the benefit without making people feel old or disenfranchised? There are some technical challenges, and again, these technical challenges often apply in almost any product and food that we develop, but they can become particularly challenging with products for the elderly. If you're trying to increase the level of nutrients, the interactions with other components, the stability and the shelf life, the loss of taste that I alluded to before, that consumers need often enhancement, herbs and spices and other ingredients are often used there. Potential interactions with medicine. I don't drink grapefruit juice anymore because I take a statin, and so there's issues like that you have to deal with. Fortification with things like potassium, magnesium, the impact on bitter taste, and added protein, depending on the product and the source, the taste and the texture can really be a challenge in the deterrent. There are also some sort of more broad-based challenges that apply actually to all age groups, and you sort of may say, well, why are you raising them? I'll say that in a minute. First of all, the consumer acceptance, taste, convenience, affordability, they all apply. But the issue that I touched on earlier, the tendency or the move we've got today to clean label, which is certainly much more, to few ingredients, only products with, less than 5 ingredients, which is certainly more prevalent among millennials and the younger group. But it is sort of either it's catching or it's moving up. And certainly as that group becomes older, it's going to become more of a challenge. And I think this is going to be an issue, and I'll show you why in a minute. The natural ingredients and this whole sort of negative perception about anything that's processed. I want something that came from nature, as though nature made everything healthy, which of course we know isn't true. I rarely give a presentation without using a slide like this. Some of you may have seen it. When you show this to most people, I won't do a poll of hands, but most people say, no way would I want to eat this. It's got way too many ingredients. The observant among you will see it must come from Europe because it has an E number there. Well, maybe you know the answer. It's a banana. You do it just to say the fallacy of it. I mean, we're sort of confusing people with these sort of simplistic statements. This is another one that some of you may have seen. Eric Decker, professor of food science at UMass, has used this for a couple of years. It took me a year to get it off him because he wanted, I don't blame him. He's got a graphic version that I didn't have time for. But basically, it's tongue-in-cheek. It's sort of saying, hey, look, a cow takes plant material, which we know is good for us. It does particle size reduction, hydrolysis, fermentation, hydrogenation, interesterification, emulsification, all these nasty processes that the food industry uses that we don't want to touch. Yeah, it makes milk and things we want to consume. That's okay. It just points out the silliness of sort of what we're dealing with. And again, I'll come back to that later. But the other major area is regulatory challenges, and I know that a lot of people in the room are very familiar with this. The simplest way to put this is that, rightly or wrongly, the food industry for many years has been very frustrated with the differences between the way in which food is regulated and supplements are regulated with two different agencies in DSHEA. And certainly as a non-native born, an immigrant, I've never understood why the US regulatory system is what it is, other than, it's hard to change it. I mean, to me, it could be simplified a lot. But whether it's right or wrong, and if you look at the text of the laws, there really isn't theoretically as much difference as the food industry tends to believe. But in practice, certainly, it has been a major deterrent. I can tell you that throughout my career. There were major concerns and issues. And I think most of it comes down to a belief. Again, I'm not going to argue whether it's true or not, that the food industry gets policed a lot more closely, and the supplement industry, quote, can get away with more than it should. I can certainly tell you that there are times when, both within my company and other colleagues that I talk to around the industry, there was almost it isn't worth us putting the effort into some of these activities because we're not going to get them to market. The supplement business is going to do it. I think with hindsight it's wrong, because I think the net of that is what you saw in my first two slides. The food industry has very few products that it's specifically developed for that area, and the supplement's been very successful. So I think it is something that the food industry needs to look at it very differently. But I would also argue that there's probably an opportunity here, challenging as it is, to look at how we regulate the foods. And one example that many of you may be familiar with that I think has been successful is Japan. Now, Japan was one of the first countries to deal with an aging population. Now, FOSHU, as it's called, or abbreviated to, are specific regulations for health claims. They were not developed uniquely and specifically for the elderly, just like we've heard of many things. But in fact, many of the products that were developed and many of the benefits that have been allowed market to the elderly. And it's generated now $6 billion of sales in that area. Now, this is just some examples there. I won't go through them of the health claims that have been approved. But they are actually much broader and much more available than they are in the United States. And interestingly, in Europe, where for many years Europe was more restrictive, finally, slowly but surely, EFSA and the EU is starting to approve more and more claims. So there's actually a tendency at the moment to be able to do more in Europe than we're able to do in the United States. So I would just sort of argue that's one area that we really need to look at. Enough with the problems. So what are the opportunities? Because that's what we're looking for. Well, what do we have to think about? Flavor. Taste, flavor always matters. Already said, people are drawn to strong and bold flavors. They want ethnic and authentic flavors, not necessarily spicy, hot. People like fun, so opportunities there. And dessert. I mean, desserts is quite a major area, but people are choosy. Convenience. Again, they're not unique to the older adults, but breakfast food is a major opportunity area. We've heard before yesterday about kind of morning is often an important area, and breakfast foods, and we're seeing these now that contain nutrients, not just as historically the fortification with vitamins and minerals, but with fiber, with protein. 34% eat cereal because it's a good source of vitamins, but opportunities for other areas too. And the opening of packages. I mean, even before I was 50, I used to go crazy with opening packages. I used to go around the labs and sort of misopen packages just to illustrate how bad they were within Kraft. To me, it's a major challenge, and certainly it becomes more of an issue. So whether it's opening, whether it's reclosing, whether it's how you grip them, the whole site, legibility, I mean, the ability to read the ingredient lines, major opportunities and the challenges there. Health and wellness, obviously we're talking predominantly of that. Concern about weight is still the #1 issue among this group. But they're looking for healthy and flavorful foods, smaller meal sizes, packs, but nutrient dense, provide the nutrient in smaller pack sizes. Snacking, as I've touched on, is particularly prevalent among the younger boomers. But again, that's going to move as we go forward and is a real opportunity. And this group likes to snack on familiar, but interested in more healthy versions of those snacks. Snacking after dinner, desserts again, as I mentioned before. And the whole area of protein and the relationship between protein and satiety, which provides an opportunity both in terms of the potential to get more protein, but actually helping people with their weight management. I'm not going to go through this slide. This is a slide that I just pulled out from one of the global market research companies. It just illustrates how much is going on in the world of protein. This is global, I mean, whether it's products, whether it's patents. I mean, I heard yesterday the EU doesn't think there's enough data to change the DRI for protein. You know what? It really doesn't matter. Consumers have already voted. The industry's already. This is an area where we probably don't have to do much. It's going to happen. I mean, it's enormous. It's the hottest area probably in terms of new products and so forth. In terms of nutrients, again, I won't go through the list, but there is a whole range of nutrients that can potentially address the issues that we've already talked about, from calcium to whey protein. The opportunities, I talked before about the marketing and the challenges. Focus the marketing on the consumers in their home, smaller portions, natural, simple ingredients. Focusing on the benefits of the product to resonate with the specific health needs. Certainly don't position older consumers as elderly, and look for prepackaged meals, particularly for those who cannot cook. I thought the last presentation was a fantastic example, and I think I have an example of that in terms of meal services. Couple of interesting ideas. These may be getting a little far out, but just to show you how new technologies and sciences could potentially help. I think everybody in the room is familiar with 3D. Most people, if you're like me, say, I'm not sure, it's big, but I don't know what we're going to use it for other than maybe designing packaging more quickly. Interesting project the EU is funding called Smooth Food, which is designed for those consumers who have problems with eating. So it's sort of going to be a soft food that tastes like food, but it can be swallowed and so forth. I mean, just an interesting idea. Another one, maybe even more way out, I don't know, sounds a little, electric spoons, but I was intrigued by this one. I thought I'd include it, that will sort of a stimulation that sort of make foods taste great. Again, probably isn't going to be that's not going to be the one, but look to the new technologies. I think these are going to be areas. I want to wrap up with sort of some ideas, from global ideas. Again, some of the products that are going on around the world. I talked about Japan before. In 2011, there were almost 6,000 products launched globally that had a claim regarding the health of older consumers. They weren't necessarily overtly marketed to those older consumers, but that was there. And there's a list of them here that I won't go through. They go all the way from sort of yogurt mixed with grains, gelatin, coconut water, nutrient supplements. It's probably, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I'm kind of running into my yellow time, so I'm going to flip through these. Presentation is available, but these are some products in the US in terms of bone health, dairy products here. Here's a product very much along the lines, although for the supermarket, to the last one, which is designed for the elderly. Interestingly, by a daughter whose mother was ill and saw all the problems. So you've got the clear font, the easy to open, the nutrition designed, and so forth. You've got products here from China. You've got dairy products. Some of these illustrate how to market the tendency of different countries to use different age groups. You've got the Entresol, Benecol, been a product that's been around a long time, Sure Prevent, and so forth. So as I get to my red line and my concluding thoughts, I wasn't smart enough to think of food for thought. But firstly, I think the opportunities for the food industry to focus on older adults is going to get significantly greater as the boomer group today, past 70. The second one, as I've made a couple of times, the best way to improve the health of older adults is to improve the nutrition of our younger adults. And that's why I touched on and used those couple of slides. The epidemic we've got today of sort of misinformation through the food bloggers and elsewhere, I think is probably already leading to poorer diets, but I don't have the data for that, so I use the phrase could lead to poorer diets. I think it will. If we don't do something about that, the next generation is going to be in a bigger problem than the current generation. A current 50 plus, has a lot of good health habits. We're actually unlearning them with our younger generation. And finally, there's a lot of great ideas. I'm a great believer in plagiarizing ideas from wherever they come. There's a lot of great ideas around the world, whether they be product ideas, whether they be technologies, or whether they be the legislative framework. Thank you.